people who are afraid to get going on the trademark side, they're only delaying their date of first use. And that's what is going to set the stake in the ground for when their rights begin. So trademark rights begin when a seller, a provider, starts providing a good or a service that is branded with that brand.
Welcome to the Day 2 podcast. Boy, do we have an informative public service announcement episode for you guys today. There was a time when resellers ruled the roost on the Amazon marketplace, but today's Amazon is about brands, and you cannot defend your brand or reach your full Amazon potential without brand registry. Shannon, Roddy, and I today have a very special guest, Scott Harder. He is funny, he is knowledgeable and experienced, and is here to break down trademark law for us in a way that even I can understand. So, Scott, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I am doing great. I'm happy to be with y'all.
Awesome. Well, the trademarks law, it's kind of like accounting and, tax law. It's one of those things that puts most people to sleep. But, I really enjoy talking about this stuff with you, Scott. The reason I like that is because you make it fun and you make it interesting. You've got these great stories. And so I'm looking forward to unpacking some of these with you today.
Yeah, perfect.
But let's start with the first question that we have, which is, we like to demystify things here on the Day 2 podcast. What are the top myths that you run across, or that even you hear from brands or people that you hear every day? And what are those? What's wrong about those myths?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest thing that we encounter is a misunderstanding about how strong a brand has to be on its own. So, for example, a lot of sellers, they'll go and they'll search on Google, or they'll even maybe search the USPTO database. They'll look for their brand, which is in their mind, they've built the whole thing and we're off and ready. They've got the logo designed, and they type it in and they come to me and they go like, I didn't find anything like it. So I think we're good to go. And I usually suggest some kind of preliminary searching up front. Honestly, candidly, many sellers don't elect to do any search. And so invariably that leads to the problem where they realize the first misconception or myth. The examiner doesn't care if it's not exactly the same. The examiner is going to reject your application, and you're going to have to start from scratch a year from now if he finds something that is confusingly similar. And so one way to think of it is like, branding is it's designed, it's a law to protect the consuming public. So you have to think exact identity isn't required. It's what an idiot in a hurry might be mistaken that these two separate, products are coming from the same entity.
And so that's a great point. So myth number one, brand comes to you. Hey, Scott, I did a search on USPTO.gov. Is that the website that you're referring to?
Yeah, that's it. And sellers can do that. It's not hard to do, and I recommend that they do.
I did a search. I don't see my brand name popping up. I'm good to go. Just go file the thing for me.
That's right.
And so what they're missing is that ever important brand name search, or what's the official name for the deep dive search?
So the Amazon selected law firms that participate in this, IP Accelerator program. Yep. There's three kind of service levels that Amazon has had us agree to. One is just to file the application. I've done all my homework. I've got the push-ups figured out. I'm paying you to do just one thing. And then there's two other service levels. One is what we call a cursory search, which is somebody who lives and breathes trademarks doing a search, and we'll find some of those things that really aren't dead-on matches, but might have the letter or the number 3 where the brand might have the letter E. Those kinds of things. Again, the idiot in a hurry is maybe not going to pick up on that, and to pronounce it, people pronounce those kinds of digit transpositions the same way. So we'll catch those kinds of things, and that's at a pretty low price point, much less than even filing the application. And then there is a more comprehensive search that we have done. We have third-party providers that perform these for us. They come back with a telephone book full of every possible listing So that brand owner is going to go in really with an understanding of what the world is. But, a lot of the sellers, they're starting up, they're fledgling, they have more time than money in many cases. So they have to make some business risk decisions. And one of those is how much money can you put into having the perfect intellectual property fortress around a product that maybe isn't moving on Amazon.
I know how sellers think. They're like, oh, if I don't have to do it, if it's not a requirement, I'm going to save the $500. What's a good price range for a search?
Search is about $500 is the price that we had agreed to with Amazon, and those are 2022 prices. I don't know if in 2023 Amazon's going to give us a bump, but if it is a bump, it won't be a very large one. This has been an inflationary year. I mean, everyone's kind of moving the numbers up, but yeah,
$500. It's a cheap date. It gives you most of the potential future legal challenges in a book before you cross the line of departure with a registration. Saves you a lot of time, heartache, and headache in the future, right?
Yeah, so it reduces the risk of getting to this point, a year and a half down the road.
Yeah,
when you've set up your brand, you've got inventory on hand, and then whatever you have, maybe good, customer recognition on Amazon. You have to start from scratch. All of that goes away.
Scott, I had to tell you the story. So my very first company was named Super Duper Hoops. We were a basketball drop shipper, right? And so, you could, as a trademark attorney, that's a knowing laugh and smile right there, because you know what I'm about to say. When we did our brand name search for Super Duper Hoops, it was like 4 phone books of data that came back. And I think we actually had to pay $1,500 because there were so many hits for that thing. Right. And I remember going to Jorge Arciniega, who is an amazingly talented attorney with this big multinational firm, McDermott, Will & Emery. And we said, we want to trademark this name. We love this name. This name is so cool. It's funny. It's energetic. It's everything. And Jorge after looking at that search, goes, well, the good news, Jason, is we can get your mark trademarked. The bad news is you're going to be my largest client. And right now, Microsoft is my biggest client. And so you decide.
Welcome to the party.
Welcome to the party. That's right. That's right. And so I learned a lot from that experience. But that one was so obvious, though. Tell us another reason why Super Duper Hoops is such a bad trademarkable name, aside from the search discussion.
Yeah. So the search discussion. So right up front, certain things are just not registerable. Yeah. And so when you're selecting your brand, you want to have it be something that is, hopefully the more distinctive, the better. There's fewer of these other uses in connection with anything. That way, when somebody encounters Kodak, back in the day, they would assume, cameras, film, that kind of stuff. That's a name that they just invented.
Or Apple. Apple doesn't have anything to do with a fruit.
Right. That was is exactly what was going to be my next, example was because Apple's great because it has nothing to do with computers. Apple is a terrible trademark for apples, right? You can't, the trademark office will not give that to you because other Granny Smith apples have to call themselves apples, just like the Fuji Apple guy does.
Right.
So it's that kind of thought process where the trademark doesn't stand by itself. It's always you always have to think about it in connection with how strong is the mark in connection with those goods and products that you're going to be selling or services. So, but a lot of people don't want to or don't have the budget to have a Super Bowl, commercial or something to get that brand, identification up. So they want it to be a little bit what we call maybe suggestive, downy. For an example, as a fabric softener, you might imagine like, oh, that's going to be soft and fluffy and, maybe not really feathery. But so it kind of suggests what the product is without really kind of giving it away. It's called a spectrum of distinctiveness, blah, 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 lawyer words. But the basic idea is you don't want to be on the Apple side of that spectrum selling apples. You want to be on the Apple side of that spectrum selling computers or toasters or whatever you have.
To take it back, Scott and I met a couple of years ago, and what I enjoyed and appreciated so much about Scott was we were on an email thread together with a client who had some questions. I think they were enrolling their brand in brand registry. And what I loved about Scott is Scott responded helpfully. And it's amazing how many attorneys are kind of like, don't bother me, I'm busy. And yet that's exactly what you're paying them to do. And so since then, I've referred dozens of clients to Scott. Everybody's had a great experience, myself included. And so that's one of the reasons I was so excited to have him on today. But Scott, I want to take it up to the 30,000 foot view for a second.
Yeah.
Talk in real brief terms, what is the point of a trademark? What does it actually protect? We'll get into what it means on Amazon, but just from a legal standpoint, what does that trademark actually do for the brand?
Yeah, trademark rights are established to really protect the consuming public. So we want to give people who invest the time and effort to build a brand, and brands that don't mean it has to be the highest end product. It just has to be consistent across use of that brand. Like you could think McDonald's hamburgers might not be the highest quality hamburger you're ever going to have, but it's going to be the same if you order one in Dallas, Texas, or Beijing. So that's the idea. It's to give the consuming public confidence that the goods or services that they're purchasing come from this common source. It comes from the brand holder. It's not somebody trying to pass off, a fake hamburger as a genuine McDonald's hamburger, for example.
And to your point earlier, in terms of doing that initial search, we kind of mentioned it's a really bad idea to take all the time to build your brand and build the website and get products with your label on it without actually knowing if you can get that trademark. I've talked to clients who actually went through the trademark process, and as they finished, basically realized that somebody else had the exact same mark that had been issued at the exact same time, and they wound up spending about $20,000 to fight it. And, one of the other Amazon consultants that I talk with, it's like, why would you even do that? Nobody knows your brand at this point. It's not even that great a name. Yeah. Take that $20,000, buy a new name that you can trademark, buy a new website, get a new logo redesign, right? The time and effort and energy to rebranding isn't worth it if nobody knows your brand yet, regardless of how cool it is. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, it really is a great point, and that's a terrible story for those people. They went down, they started, they're already doing 7,000 jobs, and they think they're doing the best. But before you start investing, I mean, to your point, is self-explanatory. I think before you start investing a lot in a brand that you don't even really know that you own or are going to be able to acquire, it's worth it to at least do the processes in parallel, so you could hit the brakes if it looks like you're going to run into some kinds of problems. And so the other thing I've heard to combat that, and this relates to that distinctiveness spectrum, is a story that I think we were talking about last time, because the strongest brand or the strongest trademarks are ones that aren't in use. I mentioned Kodak. And so what the trademark office is seeing a lot of now are people that just basically have a random letter generator to spit out their trademark. You can tell it, I need it to be 7 characters long, and I don't want it to be a word in any dictionary anywhere. And poof, out comes one. And I joke that you could use this also to have set your passwords for your online banking because they're that ridiculous. And then some of them are very long. But the thing is, you're going to, I mean, that is very, very likely going to get through the trademark office because there isn't another one used in connection with the same goods and services that you're doing. So the problem is it's just unpronounceable. It's irrepeatable. No one's ever actually going to remember it. But if what you're trying to do is game the system, that is something that I think there are a couple of firms out there are advising people to do it that way. And ultimately, I think that's going to be a little bit of a failed strategy. The trademark office is already kind of cracking down on just the avalanche of new applications that they're getting. I think largely in part of Amazon's brand registry program.
Back to your question about why you need a trademark, Shannon, in this Amazon game, you got to have it. You got to have a registered trademark. And then, we'd love to get your take on the IP Accelerator here in a second, Scott, because I know that you were one of the first in that program. But if you don't have a registered trademark, you don't have all of the brand benefits that come along with brand registry. And to your point, Scott, it's funny. I remember seeing this brand VRST. I think I bought like some running shorts on Amazon from them. And it was obvious that it was a China brand, one of the gazillion brand names that have like no vowels. Of course, the funny part was I got served an ad the other day. Maybe it was through DSP, maybe not, but I was on one of my news programs that I watch. I clicked through to the ad and they had this great branded website now. So they actually took this thing with no vowels that was kind of laughable before, and they're actually turning it into a brand now. So maybe I was wrong about these terrible trademark names. It's very easy. And I couldn't agree with you more. I did about how many new trademarks are the USPTO office is getting flooded with, because every Amazon seller, and there's 2 million of them, know that you need a trademark in order to get brand registry. When you talk to the folks at the USPTO, are they just slammed over there right now or what?
They're slammed. They're hiring like crazy. They are actively, and for me, I'd say probably the last year, maybe a little longer, they've been actively trying to weed out disingenuous or outright fraudulent trademark applications. So if an applicant, if the owner of a brand does not reside within the U.S., they need to have U.S. counsel file the trademark. That's a relatively new requirement, and it's because of this. It's just a way for the trademark office to start putting little bit of maybe easy gates to get through, but gates up in front of their doors, because once the application's in their inbox, they've got to do something about it. And all the rest of the trademark applicants want that box to move to, because we're all in this backlog now that used to be a couple of months to some kind of a first indication. That's getting stretched 6 months, maybe a little longer. So the trademark office process used to be, quick or relatively quick for an application that was like, on rails, good to go. Now those are taking, 18 months, maybe a little bit longer to some kind of a final disposition. The trademark office is aware. They're doing what they can do, and we'll see what comes. I don't think we've got any fee increases for the new year from the trademark office, so that's a good sign.
I'm really happy to hear that they're putting in those guardrails in there. That's fantastic.
Jason, I was just going to say, those brand names are great until you have to tell a friend about it. And then it's like, they're great for digital.
Is it VR? What is this? Right.
I have to say, Spanx and Chick-fil-A are some of my favorite brand names, because it's like you take sort of a common word, you change a letter, it changes the meaning, but you kind of get the concept of it. And they did that very intentionally. And those trademarks have gone through and obviously stood the test of time. But you got to have something distinctive that not only people can remember, but at some point can pronounce if you want them to share it with their friends.
Yeah.
So Scott and Shannon, certainly Amazon has made life difficult for the USPTO because of the requirement to have a trademark for brand registry. There's probably more trademarks filed in the last few years than there have in the previous 6 or 7, perhaps. I think I looked at those numbers recently and saw something similar. But at the same time, Scott, they've introduced a program that, because they've created bigger backlogs at the USPTO office, a program that helps brands and sellers get their brand registry a little bit sooner. When did Amazon contact you about this? How did you find out about this program? I know that you were involved from very early on. Walk us through the IP Accelerator program.
Yeah, so this was, I want to say maybe 3 years ago. It was this time of year. I was at my in-laws' house, for Thanksgiving, and we were just out, having dinner or something. And you know how it is. Everyone comes home, for Thanksgiving. So all the kids are visiting parents. And I just happened to run in to somebody who I didn't know, but was a friend of the family, et cetera. The dominoes started falling, and we didn't really have much to say, so we're just kind of standing over there in the corner. Then it's eventually get around. Who are you? What do you do? Oh, I'm an attorney. Well, long story short, she was in house with Amazon at the time, and they had been talking about trying to set something like this up, and they thought they were about at the time where they wanted to start talking to law firms to see if they had kind of thought through all the issues that they thought law firms might also have. And would I mind, kind of joining some calls and fleshing it out a little bit more? And I said, no, that sounds interesting. Happy to.
So you literally bumped into an Amazon lawyer at a barbecue.
Essentially.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So that's why you always have to talk shop, I suppose. I'm terrible, but there you go. Now I should teach myself a lesson.
Dale Dabbs, our president, and Shannon, he's trying to teach me. Always talk to the people on the plane next to you, right? Yeah. I have such a hard time with that. I'm such an introvert, but yeah. Yeah, I got it. Well done, Scott. So where did it go from there?
So then we met, the process the system got set up. The initial reaction was overwhelming. It absolutely, for the first 2-3 months, it almost just completely overwhelmed my practice. I must have been getting 150 inquiries a day, and the other IP accelerator firms had to be in the same boat. So we did our best. We tried to kind of, keep the doors closed and off we go. So we learned a lot of lessons there. We changed some procedures, but we actually had it kind of buttoned up. But the whole process was set up as because the sellers needed a registered trademark to get the benefits of the brand registry or the A+ or whatever the process is that Amazon calls it these days. If you didn't come to them with, that 7-digit number, you were out of luck. And sellers said, I'm trying to get that, but my attorney says it's going to take 18 months to 2 years to have that. We need something in between. So then that's what led to this barbecue bump in and the process, which now lets sellers apply for early kind of consideration to the brand registry process. And I say it that way because it's not guaranteed. If the trademark doesn't make it all the way through the system, Amazon kind of tracks you. And once your application is ultimately abandoned, you will fall out of the brand registry system. So you need to get all the way over the goal line. But anyway, for the sellers who are just getting something started up, it gives them all of those benefits almost right at the beginning. And it's I really do feel we wouldn't be seeing the interest in the applications if it didn't really, really matter to the sellers or wasn't valuable.
Yeah. The brand benefits literally increase every week, Jason. You've got search query data, you've got stores, you've got brand ads, video ads. There are so many things that you can't do if you're restricted from or prevented from brand registry. And to Amazon's credit, one of the other things that I've seen is they are occasionally allowing you to register your brand with the serial number. Basically, somebody who says, I already started the trademark process. I didn't know about IP Accelerator. So now I'm kind of stuck in the middle. I can't fire my attorney and go back and hire an IP Accelerator. And we have seen serial numbers get approved for brand registry. But to your point, Scott, same thing. If that trade name does not get fully registered, Amazon will pull back those benefits.
Yeah, that's right.
So, Scott, let's unpack this a little bit. So there's pre-negotiated rates. Does Amazon put a cap on what you can charge your client, you and other IP firms that are in this program?
They really don't. So one maybe important distinction is, I don't work for Amazon. I don't represent Amazon. Lawyers are always very particular about having the best interest of the client top of mind. Right. And so it would be difficult. It would be a difficult spot for a lawyer to be in if I represented Amazon on one hand and these sellers on the other hand, because they could become adversarial at some point. Maybe there's a disagreement about the strength of the brand or what have you. And I need to be in a position to pick sides. And so the way you do it is you just don't, you can't do both sides. So I only got, my loyalty is to the client. The way that the process, goes from there is the only thing I ever communicate to Amazon is the serial number that the trademark office assigns to the application. And that's a publicly accessible, field. The trademark office database is publicly accessible. And that's what Amazon uses to check the status of your mark. So that's how they know when
that's it. That's all you give Amazon?
That's it.
You don't give them any tips, say, hey, we think this has a high likelihood of success or not. You just say, hey, the process has begun.
We filed this, and there's no communication with Amazon at all. They don't tell us what we can charge, but they stress to us the importance of the sellers need some kind of consistency, some continuity. What it's like when you go to a store and you're trying to buy spaghetti sauce in there. So 17 different brands, everyone has a different price. How do you pick one? Right? It's paralyzed. So they said it would be really better if, for these 10 firms, if you just would commit to this pricing structure for these 3 things that we think all sellers are going to maybe need 1 or 2 of.
Yeah.
And then after that, you're
off.
off to the races. So the Amazon doesn't have a gun to our head, and we don't really communicate it with them throughout the process. Now, to be sure, I do have people that I know on the trademark side inside Amazon, and we can talk to them about particular issues that an applicant might be having with a brand registry side item. Like, maybe they get suspended from brand registry for some reason, or maybe, you get those. Sometimes there's these emails that Amazon sends out that are hard to decipher, hard to get someone to answer. We can sometimes help with that, but that's still us representing the client, not representing Amazon.
So tell me why I'm wrong here, Scott. So I come to you, I go through the IP Accelerator, I find your firm, Fisher Broyles. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Fisher Broyles, yeah.
Fisher Broyles. And I say, boy, this firm looks good. I'm gonna contact them through the IP Accelerator Seller Central portal. Is it safe to say it's in Seller Central?
Yeah, that is where it is.
Okay, got it. And then I say to you, Scott, hey, I just did a USPTO search. I'm good to go. Just go and file this. And then you tell me, no, you must do a search. And I say, oh, you're much smarter than I am on this, Scott. I'm going to go ahead and pay that $500 to $700. And I'm going to do the search. I'm going to have you review that search and tell me if this name is a good risk. And then I'm scot-free once you file it, right? Then I'm good. Everything's going to go perfectly, right, Scott?
Yeah. Sales will begin immediately after that.
What are some of the downsides that can still happen even after you follow all of those steps and you do everything the right way?
We've done everything right. We have the application filed. I give you some information about how to get the brand registry process started. You do that. Amazon invites you in, and then we're at the bottom of an inbox at the trademark office. So the first thing that can go wrong, we've hopefully tried to prevent as best we can by having done the search.
Right.
So hopefully when the examiner picks it up, she'll reach the same conclusion that we did, like, oh, this looks good to go. It's ready for publication. At that point, there's a very short window for the public to chime in on whether or not they think pending applications might pose a risk to their brand, which might not be registered with the trademark office. It's called a publication period, and parties have a 30-day window to oppose potential marks. And those things we might not have known about. So we certainly wouldn't have known about them with a cursory search, because all we're searching there is the same trademark office that the trademark examiner is searching. So the risk here is an unregistered brand that really has been in legitimate use somewhere else. And they can, these people are going to have the facts to back it up, to succeed in this. But they can oppose or start a litigation process that can take years and tens of thousands of dollars to get to the bottom of. And it's heartbreaking. Those are very infrequent, but they happen frequently enough that it's worth a mention. I probably have 2 or 3 of those going on right now.
Scott, I want to stick on that topic for a second, because I was recently watching the cinematic masterpiece She-Hulk on the Disney Plus channel, and they had this episode about trademark. Like someone had filed a trademark for the use of She-Hulk. In the She-Hulk, of course, as a lawyer. I'm shocked that you guys haven't seen this program. It's so good. I'm a Disney Plus Marvel fan. And so every time, because I understand this concept of prior use, because I've filed so many trademarks over the last 20 years, I always get frustrated when I see it on television and they have this whole episode and this legal battle, and they don't realize that She-Hulk was using the name She-Hulk even long before the registration was applied for. So talk us through that whole idea of prior use, because if I have an idea and nobody is using it that I can find, it should be mine, right? But how does the trademark in the U.S. really work?
Yeah. So, and this is really the same, for sure in the U.S., Canada, and I think almost universally around the world, trademark rights go to the first person to use a mark, again, associated with the particular
whether
good.
they've filed anything with the USPTO or not.
You don't have to.
Right.
And so in that way, people who know a little bit about IP, they might know from the patent side, like, oh my God, you can't tell anybody anything until you filed something with the patent office. That's great advice on the patent side. On the people who are afraid to get going on the trademark side, they're only delaying their date of first use. And that's what is going to set the stake in the ground for when their rights begin. So trademark rights begin when a seller or a provider starts providing a good or a service that is branded with that brand, and they get stronger over time. A 50-year-old trademark, and maybe like Turkish rugs. The older they are, the better they are. Like Coca-Cola, very strong brand. It's been around for a very long time. So brands begin with first use, and they grow stronger with time.
Interesting. I've also heard of this strategy where you go and you find some mom and pop who's had this store in one location and in the middle of nowhere that has the name that you want to register or that your competitor has registered, and they've been using it for 20 years. You could go and potentially buy the rights to that name if they're using it, and you could use it even if those folks hadn't filed the registration, because they've been using this name in the marketplace somewhere for a long period of time, that actually is stronger than someone who has had a filed trademark for 5 years. Is that true?
Whenever you're talking to a lawyer, and I try not to do this because it gets boring if every answer is, well, that really depends. But that really,
it really depends.
No, I'm going to tell you what I think about it, but here we're on something where it really, really does depend. There are areas of trademark prosecution where, different kinds of applications where you can concede that there's somebody who has been using the mark for longer than you have. And so you're going to carve out, whatever rights they may have around Des Moines or even a smaller place. You said the middle of nowhere. So wherever that is, they've got all the rights to middle of nowhere. And I want the rights to the rest of the United States. And there's a process that the trademark office will consider. Again, it's adversarial. It can cost a lot of money. And we can carve up the country in certain ways, like that. But by and large, your idea is right. Trademark rights go to the first user. If you just think of that, and you find someone else has a first use, and you're really married to the mark, then we're gonna have to talk and come up with a budget, and we're gonna find out how much you really do love the mark if we want to starting some of those processes. Even to go and just buy the mom and pop out, right? That's not going to be a walk in the park necessarily.
No.
So no, some of those are maybe too clever by half.
I wanted to use an extreme example to sort of highlight the point, but I totally appreciate that. And you're in the law field; everything depends, right?
And so, our public disclaimer for this episode: I'm not an attorney. Jason's not an attorney. Scott is an attorney.
Yeah, don't listen to me.
Nothing in this episode should be considered as legal advice. Okay, so there's our PSA out of the way.
Yes, the extra piece is I am an attorney, but I'm not your attorney.
Got it.
Bingo. Scott is my attorney as a disclaimer, but not everybody else.
We won't be talking about that stuff on this podcast.
Yeah. So Scott, my favorite story about trademarks. My best friend Phil and I, we were up in the mountains in Colorado, in Denver, and we go into this little shop, and literally the floor was made of plywood, and he had like an old Coke machine, and like we're picking off ramen noodles and stuff off the shelves. And it was like Joe's Shack or something. And he told us about this story about getting a letter, a cease and desist letter from a big Hollywood law firm telling him that they were using a trademark name of some big conglomerate. It was like, guys, you got to be kidding me. You can't fit more than 5 people in this store. And it's just kind of silly. But I did want to ask that part about it is, once you have a trademark, it's not just that you're off to the races. What does somebody need to do to actually protect their mark? If there's other people who are using things similar or using the same trade name and they're not going after them, is there liability that it creates if you don't actively and aggressively protect that trade name?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I'd call it a liability, but there certainly is care and feeding of trademarks after they register. So there is there are periodic renewals that come due. The first one comes due 5 years after registration, and then they come pretty much like clockwork every 10 years. So that's a long calendar. If you need a system to keep track of those things, because it becomes likely that 10 years from now, the person who's handling trademarks, is moved on, or you got a new person, or they've been promoted. So you really do have to just maintain your own marks. And the other piece of that, Shannon, that you correctly point out is, customs or border, patrol, or, no one's going to enforce your marks for you, police. So you've got to do that. And the best way to find about people using, again, the standard isn't the exact same. If they're using the standard for registration is the same as it is for infringement. It doesn't have to be identical. It just has to be confusingly similar. So if you find somebody who is using a potentially confusing brand, in connection with their goods, it's good to at least start having a conversation about like what we can do. You can start off with the guns blazing and cease and desist. There are less dramatic ways, I'll say, of maybe starting that conversation. But yeah, it's definitely worth the conversation, and it is certainly something that you do want to keep your eyes on. Go to trade shows. If you're on Amazon, exclusively look at other places, and then again, you have to remember that your rights, at least with the U.S. trademark, are territorial. They're limited to the U.S. So if you see the potentially confusing mark in Canada, your U.S. trademark isn't really going to be an effective tool up north. But there are ways to expand your trademark and file in foreign countries as well. I've found that most sellers don't elect to do that, and I think responsibly. But I have to tell them that it's an option. And then when they decline, I stop telling them.
I can't tell you the number of times I've talked to prospective clients, sellers who are like, "Oh, we've got a trademark. Oh yeah, we've totally got a trademark." And I look it up, and A, they don't have a trademark. B, they don't have the trademark they thought they had.
Oh.
Or C, it's expired or abandoned. They're like, "Oh, forgot about that." I mean, it's crazy, but it's so important to protect your brand name and do that maintenance. So yeah, to Scott's point, put it in your calendar. Make sure you check it every year.
Put it in two people's calendars.
Yeah, exactly.
A follow-up question to what you're throwing down there, Shannon, is if you have, let's say I'm working with you, I'm your client, Scott, and we've got a registered trademark. We've got that piece of paper that the USPTO sends. It's very nice and thick paper, by the way. I like touching those things. It's great. When they send you that final piece of paper on cardstock that hopefully you put in a good, safe place that's fireproof, and you notice that somebody is actually using your mark, how bad can these things get? What do you recommend in terms of, just again, following up and dovetailing off what Shannon said, in terms of maintenance and enforcement once you have it? That was a terribly worded question, but I feel like you understand what I was trying to get to.
I got it. But I first have to start off with just a moment of silence. So that beautiful cardstock, suitable for framing certificate,
right? So beautiful.
They don't send it out automatically anymore.
What?
It was a cost-saving measure. It doesn't automatically go. Now they'll send you a shiny PDF that you can print out.
Come on, USPTO.
Breaking is hard.
You're by your own crush. No, and they are still doing it. I think they found a lot of people just lost them. Didn't care if they had them. It probably actually was a cost saver. I think there's a small charge now. Of course, if you want one, they will still print one for you, but it'll cost like $50.
I'll pay that. It's so cool.
But yeah, to the point of protecting your brand. How are we going to do it? What options are maybe beyond just keeping a sharp eye out for whatever your potential competitors are doing, having your ear to the ground, so to speak. Yeah. There are commercial services that will watch the U.S. Trademark Office for filings, and will watch every other trademark office in the world for filings. So you can find out if other people are starting maybe a brand campaign that seems awful close to your mark. And you can put them on notice relatively early on when it's convenient or maybe less expensive for them to change, branding directions when they've got, like a lot of investment wrapped up into the brand, and they may be more willing to fight at that point. So it might be an economical time to do it. And, I can put people in touch with those companies. I can provide the services, myself. I'm not sure that you have to be a lawyer to figure out if something that shows up on those searches needs to be brought to my attention. But it's another task that all these CEOs can add to their own plate if they want to.
Right.
But when they do see something, it is important that, that we at least have a conversation about like what we're going to do. We could elect not to do anything. Maybe we'll just watch this on our own, or maybe we'll kind of send that preemptive correspondence. Or maybe, it's such a problem that, we have to have different discussions.
Got it.
Scott, I have a quick question in terms of the use of the TM, right, which is like a pending trademark, versus the Circle R, right?
Right.
And one of the things I see consistently is people apply for the trademark, they get their logo done, they put it on their website, they even put it on their Amazon storefront, and the trademark gets registered. They never actually go back and change that TM to a Circle R. Does that waive any protections? Does it create any liability, or is that just my OCD going, why haven't you put the Circle R in there?
No, the Circle R, it is meaningful, right? It means it is registered. It doesn't diminish your ability to enforce your trademark rights. You don't even have to have a little TM. I mean, if someone's, if you're using your mark, kind of consistently, it's better to put other people on notice. There are some of the presumptions that get granted in your favor if you are putting people on notice, and using that Circle R is one of them. But you've paid for it. I mean, I think it is something that people should go back and do. I advise clients to go back. Like when I just happen across their brand, I'm going, oh, I saw your your store looks great. Next time you order a sign, change the TM to an R. So I know why they don't do it, because they've got packaging already on hand, and but they just don't think about the next order cycle. It's time to update your packaging.
Shannon, we need the Circle R on our website. I just looked.
Oh, good. It's easy. It's easy.
Awesome.
I thought you put that question to sort of rib me a little bit that we haven't done it yet, but
no, I was probably too in the weeds to notice it. I only notice it on other people's websites. Scott, I do have another important question before Jason kind of kicks off the last questions for you. But one of the questions I have comes in terms of capitalization. And so one of the things on Amazon, if you enroll your brand in brand registry with a specific capitalization, and your brand registry does not match the way your products are listed, that can be a pain. Now, thankfully, it's something that our team is very good at fixing. But for most sellers and brands, they're not aware of it. They hire some kid, he enrolled the brand registry or threw the products up. It doesn't match exactly. My question for you is, the USPTO kind of by default will just trademark everything as all caps, at least as far as I'm seeing, as I've seen. So I'll let you explain why they do that. The question is, if that gets enrolled in brand registry, can you say, hey, brand registry team, my actual capitalization for my brand name should be this, so that it matches my products that are already listed on Amazon. Can you talk a little bit about the capitalization aspect of the trademark and brand registry?
Yeah, and I think it does cause some confusion. So I'm glad that you mentioned it. At least for Amazon purposes, there's two kinds of trademarks. There's those that just consist of text only, and then there are those that consist of text in addition to some kind of a logo or stylized element. Those two different kinds of things are really at the kernel of what the problem is here. So for text only, for standard character marks, I usually just type them in, and most trademark practitioners I know type them in all caps, because standard characters, that protects that brand in any color, any font, any size, any capitalization scheme. Those letters in that arrangement, that's your brand, that's protected. Now, the reason Amazon ends up with them all as caps, I don't think it's really a practitioner specific thing. I think Amazon when they scrape the PTO records and they populate their fields, the PTO field for what the mark is always all capitalized. So Amazon just takes that data from a different database, and that's why they're all capitalized. And when sellers come and they say, "Oh no, I have to have this specific, lowercase uppercase sequence," first of all, they might not have to have that. So we could talk about that. But second of all, if it really is something that's important, like there was a lowercase I and then some other word was all the rage for a little while, right? And it's like, no, it has to be a lowercase I. If I see a capital I there, I'm going to blow something up. So for clients who really were determined to do it that way, I would file what's called a design mark. That's the other side, the design plus a logo. And there, the mark is captured at the trademark office as an image. So it's a JPEG, it's a picture. So it doesn't have what the literal element is, or what the letters are, and then you have to describe what the rest of the diagram is, like a rainbow with a unicorn, and the colors are all whether or not they're part of the brand or not. So I think that's the distinction. Did I get to it though, Shannon? I feel like I might.
Yeah, I mean, the heart of it is, if you go through an IP Accelerator, you've already got products listed on Amazon, and brand registry enrolls your brand in all caps, and Amazon's saying it doesn't match. Give our team a call. It's something that we know how to help you fix, because that's not a trademark issue. That's an Amazon internal issue, being able to align those products with that brand to make sure that they connect.
Yeah, and the other interesting thing that does come up there that I've seen, and I think you have probably seen this too, there's this kind of belief system that I have kind of a very descriptive mark. It's apples for apples kind of thing. But I think if I put a picture of an apple underneath of the word apples, I might be more likely to get it. So in other words, the logos are easier to get through the trademark office than just the words. There is a nugget of truth to that. But a problem I've seen that crops up with the logos is sometimes there's something in the logos that can be perceived as a letter. This sometimes happens unintentionally, or sometimes it does. It's just like, oh, my trademark.
Like Baskin Robbins, BR Baskin Robbins, right? You got the Baskin Robbins logo.
That's perfect. And so if Baskin Robbins went to Amazon and they only had that logo, their Amazon store name would have to be BR Baskin Robbins. It would have to include the letters from the logo element as well. And most sellers don't want that. The logo element is just to kind of get them over the line. But if the logo can be seen in some way as a letter or a number, that has to be included as part of the mark. And then if it is part of the mark, then it's also to match Amazon. It's also got to be your store name.
What's the recommendation for the average seller, to do a text mark or to do a design mark for brand registry purposes? Sounds like text, maybe.
For brand, if your purpose is brand registry, and maybe you think like, you know what, I'm never going to go out, I'm never going to enforce this, I'm just using this. I mean, I'm not going to do a search, I'm not going to do any of this like policing the marketplace for similar markets. This is just to get me in the door. The best thing to do is probably some kind of a logo maybe the random number letter generator kind of a trademark, because you're not going to have problems with me or the trademark office. You're going to probably go right through. I suppose, leave it at that. And I say some kind of a logo because that will also prevent or give us arguments if there's something else that's confusingly similar. So it doesn't have anything really to do with getting to the Amazon side. It's getting through the trademark office in the cheapest absolute way possible.
Got it. And then, of course, the answer is it depends, right? So that's why you need a professional. That's why you need a professional to run these ideas by them who knows the game. Both the Amazon game and
it's always a good idea to ask those questions because sometimes a text mark is better. So the conventional wisdom is because a text mark can be any color, any size, any whatever, and used with any kind of bells and whistles. Word marks are considered a little bit stronger. So if you're looking for some kind of strength, and again, you might not never intend to enforce this this asset. This is intellectual property asset that you have. But if your goal is to, at some point exit the company, hopefully there's an exit strategy, there's an acquisition. You want to be able to sell the person who's buying your company something that is valuable, not just a throwaway that I just did for this one thing and I'm never going to pay any attention to it. So. I don't mean to minimize the importance of kind of doing it right. I mean, let's we're filing for a trademark. Let's file the best trademark for your particular circumstances.
And look, I'm very sympathetic as always with sellers. So it's hard sometimes. You got your baby, you got your name, but look, if you can't get a good strong word mark name, if you can't get a text name passed, maybe it's time to think about a different name. Guys, Super Duper Hoops was the coolest name ever, and I had to give it up, and I cried myself to sleep for days before giving that thing up. I feel you, but just do what's right, do what's defensible, do something that can go on your balance sheet when you have that big exit.
That's what you want.
Yeah, you don't have to kill your baby.
Own bill.
Rename it.
Yeah. Scott, we talked a little bit about this one offline about some juicy fraud stuff. Fraud and douchebaggery. Under that headline, you're seeing a lot of this stuff, and you mentioned one about what some of the Chinese nationals are doing on Amazon. What are some things that are happening that sellers maybe should be aware of, and maybe not surprised if it starts to happen to them? Or what are some of these fraud things you're seeing?
Let me talk about just two real quick. So one's kind of a fraud, and one is just kind of an irritating solicitation. So the fraud one is. There are companies, and again, the Trademark Office is aware of this, and they are starting to crack down on it, that are trying to do this kind of high volume, just kind of like just rapid, filing after filing after filing. And they're, not licensed attorneys, but the problem with the public registry is like all of my data is in there. So what this person might do is they might go and just find any trademark that's registered, copy somebody's, some attorney's, information off of that. They would put that in as their own. They sign their own application, and in it goes. And the Trademark Office, usually doesn't closely examine everything until something makes them go And in these past couple of years, they've gone So they're looking much closer at things that used to just kind of pass through without much scrutiny. So that's the outright fraud. And so the danger for our sellers are if you get trapped into one of these and you file with them, the Trademark Office has kind of identified all of these suspect applications, pulled their serial numbers. You have to file again. So it's just a complete start over, and you have to use somebody reputable, and you're going to get pretty close scrutiny because you've already looked like you're trying to kind of get a fast one by us the first time. Yeah. So that's the fraud, and then the more irritating one is again with the public registry. All of my information is in there, all of your information is in there too.
Right.
And it's a public registry, publicly searchable. It's a wealth of information that people try to figure out how to monetize. And one way that they do that is maybe when your brand registers, you'll start to get these reminders, helpful reminders. They'll usually come by U.S. mail because hopefully our email addresses are, obscured at the trademark office, but they'll come and they'll look official, like World Trademark, Bureau, your trademark, and then it'll accurately depict what your trademark is. It looks like it's coming due for a renewal, and you'll remember, like, oh yeah, Scott said I have to have a renewal every once in a while. And then,
how many of those have you gotten, Shannon? I get those pieces of paper in the mail. I think I've maybe gotten 20 million of those things.
I'm too busy turning down my extended auto insurance that I get calls for every day.
And they're scary, right? They're scary. They're like, oh, it looks official. It looks like it's from the USPTO. I get them now, Scott, and I just put them in the shredder. That's what you guys should do with those things. Talk to your attorney. If you see anything that scares you, run it by your attorney. That's a lesson there. And man, that's amazing, that fraud stuff. I'm always amazed in this space and in yours, Scott, just how much real idiocy is out there. People not wanting to play by the rules, and I just don't get it. But it does make for some good stories. It's amazing. Hopefully none of our listeners and viewers are fall victim to any of this stuff. But now that they're armed with the information, they'll know who to talk to.
Yeah, at least spot the issue and ask. So.
That's right. That's right. Well, Scott, look, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your time. There's so much to unpack with the simple thing, that registered trademark, but there's so many things to consider. How can our folks reach you if they want to clean up their trademark, double check and see if their trademark is good, or even file one? What's the best way to reach it?
Yeah, the best way to reach me is probably by email. I am turning those around pretty much more reliably. And that email is my name, Scott.Harders@Fisher Broyles, my law firm. So it's a mouthful, but that's FisherBroyles.com. So that's probably the best way to get a hold of me. Or you could go to FisherBroyles.com. That's our webpage. You can find me there. There's a link with my email address for sure. Might have my phone number there too, so you can feel free to call. If I don't get it, leave a message, obviously, and I'll get back as quick as I can. But email is preferred because I can handle those a little bit anywhere I am.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you for your time and your knowledge, Scott. I appreciate it. And on behalf of all the Amazon sellers, we thank you. In the final analysis, folks, don't half-ass your trademark. Hire a professional, do a search, do it the right way. This is a valuable asset that is going to add value to you and your big future exit. And just do it right. And it's easier than ever to get brand registry. Use the IP Accelerator. I always forget the URL, Shannon, but I just type in IP.
We'll put it in the show notes. Yeah.
Great. I type in IP Accelerator on Google and the Amazon webpage pops up. Use that program. You'll see Fisher Broyles in there. And do the right thing and protect yourself. So thank you for listening. Folks, if you're ready to start growing and protecting your brand on Amazon with a team of experienced Amazon operators, you can visit us at day2podcast.com. That's day2podcast.com. And lastly, if you know of anyone else who would gain value from this podcast, please share it with them. Thanks for listening and happy selling.